So please put your hands together for the wonderful Priscilla and Monica. Thank you very much.
Yay, yay. Hi. Are those slides okay?
Yep, they're perfect.
That's great. So I'm Priscilla Nelson. I'm a social earth scientist and engineer. So I am really confused about most things, but I'm also very brave. And I was very excited to meet and become friends and colleagues with Monica Ospina, my partner. Monica, introduce yourself.
Well, hello everybody. Really nice to meet you. I'm Monica Ospina. I have been working on the social side of mining for almost 20 years, doing boots on the ground, mosquito bites, as we always describe it, like the experience of social scientists is really measuring mosquito bites and dealing with the frustration of many communities, and at the same time building bridges, which I think is the value that we can bring on the table. And this story with Priscilla is precisely one that starts off collaboration and very much looking to find a solution. So, well, let me tell you a story because Priscilla was a little bit shy of starting, but this comes from this amazing woman. And I had the privilege to guest lecture at the Colorado School of Mines on a stakeholder engagement. And we start conversations back in 2022, and we were saying, well, this is like friends sitting in a dining table. And that's Priscilla's analogy on that. So that's why we invited dining table here. And that concept has been part of our story and how we are visioning this, and is how we can do collaboration and how we can explore conversations that are not comfortable, and from issues that are of sincere interest to learn from each other. So basically, Priscilla comes from the very scientist academic background. I'm come from the mosquito bite social common ground. We will say there is nothing in common here. But when we start asking next, Priscilla. So were talking about how did mining ended up here? That was the question we want to answer. So why so bad? When it's so much fun, why is it so bad when the minerals are we are the first part in the supply chain of all industries worldwide? Why so bad if agriculture and mining are just the basic for to sustain humanity? So Priscilla and I, we sit in our dining table and we start talking about that since 2022. And to be honest with you, one thing that was amazing, and when we talk about collaboration, is that we didn't have any form of shape of how this will end. But we were clear that we want to have friends around the table to share their views, to share ideas, and to find solution on how we ended up here, how we can move over. So that's when mining dialogues start. Next, Priscilla. And after we invite two friends to the dining table, Glenn and Luke, and this is how the first series of the podcast started. I think that back 2022, we never thought this will be a podcast. Seriously. We were just thinking, and that's why the dining table is there. We always thinking that we'll be friends around the dining table. And when we invite Glenn and Luke, I had the fortune to know Glenn for quite a few years, and happens that they know each other, and happens that they have shared stories. And Priscilla, I stop here because this is the part that was fascinating when you start interacting with them, and we start all together putting our heads together. And let's talk about how we collaborate at that.
So I think it was fantastic. Monica and I were bound and determined to have the conversations that were not being had. And we needed to find the voices that needed to be heard and pose it in the correct way. Many conversations from 2022 through 2023 with people all over the world. And I had a first conversation with Glenn, and he just started doing a brain dump on me. And I said, "You're talking about things I don't know about the mining industry," because he's been in it since 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And he had this perspective, which was integrating over time to how did we get to where we are now. And he put me on to Luke. And I had met Luke before, but he also gave a brain dump on me. And the two of them had worked together over that long period of time. And it occurred to Monica and me that this story of the evolution of how did we get to where we are now regarding mining and the perspective of the world about mining, which generally is negative. How did we get here? And so we invited Glenn and Luke to start talking, and it evolved as it evolved. We started a first podcast, and then we had a second one, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth, sort of chronologically building this concept of from mining in the 1950s, which was really not very environmentally wise, not responsive very much to the social aspects and the environmental aspects, through the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency and everything going on in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, a lot of things were learned, and a lot of these things have been forgotten. So we made the commitment for the podcasts to tell the story that includes the things that everyone who is now in the mining industry, who was not in the mining industry even 10 years ago, could understand what has been learned and what does not have to be relearned. Very exciting, and it was also very interesting these days with the strange politics of the United States, that Luke and I are both from the United States, Glenn and Monica are both from Canada, and we figured out how to collaborate without engaging in politics.
And no tariffs, eh? But Priscilla, well, there are a couple of things that I think that I would love to add here. When we start navigating, and that's why we landed in this title, From Trouble to Transformation, when we start navigating history, we learn that the history of mining is very easy to judge and be very harsh using today's lens of human rights, today's lens of transparency, today's lens of how finance is working, the new generations, the interest on social justice and all of this from today. We're coming from an industry that is very old. We're coming from an industry that most of the time the government has fully control. And that is the deals that happen between the mining and the government. And most of the time was private door deals. So that's where we're coming from. And democracy was not all around the world back in the 50s. It has been a phenomenon in the last 100 years. And this is when we started discovering how social science marry with geopolitics, and mining obviously is how it materializes, which I think that is the very interesting piece. When communities start getting a voice in those countries that were authoritarian regimes and so on, it reshapes the nature of the relationship we had. So we need to be clear in one thing that is very interesting, is that mining has accompanied humanity in every step of development, social, political, philosophical, and it is shaping. And right now we see a participatory process because we see communities having a voice, because those countries become democracies, because social media have access to transparency and communicate. So all of this has reshaped that, and that's why we see the transformation today. I think that is very, very critical. And the conversation between Glenn and Luke was all the time kind of revealing many pieces, no? That's why the conversation was not ending. And Priscilla has to be the hard one saying, "No, sorry, guys. This is gonna be a forever conversation. We need to close the series." Go, Priscilla.
Yeah, I said we had to cut them off sometimes, I must say. But I learned a lot, and reflecting back to one of the speakers in the second session, Sarah, the concept of the amygdala setting in, and I could feel my amygdala setting in when I didn't think I was being heard, or in other people when they didn't think they were being heard, and you could see this concept of whether it's micro meditation or micro mediation coming in. I learned a lot during this process. And what I finally did when Sarah asked me and Monica to come to this conference was I threw all of the transcripts of all of the podcasts into ChatGPT.
Our assistant.
And I said, what collaborations have been identified that are needed, that we need to understand exactly how to focus on each one of them. And so these are the 10 top collaboration areas that ChatGPT identified, slightly modified for the words that we wanted. And they are, it's a framework that actually allows you to say, if I'm going to deal with that collaboration, who needs to be at the table? And what does the conversation need to be? And so we're embarking on future mining dialogues that can address some of these collaboration needs by bringing in people who have been involved in each one of them, and then building a framework of understanding the nature of that collaboration and how it needs to be developed. Monica, go for it.
Well, this is interesting because this is very much from obviously, Glenn and Luke come a lot from the social and development side, but this has to bring a little bit of pepper and salt from the science perspective, because all of them are linked. So, for example, when we talk about legacy of mines and closure, we are talking a lot about tailings, and we're talking a lot about economics too. And so when we talk about water stewardship, we talk about environment, water management, and health and safety, community engagement, planning. So when we were talking with Priscilla about our assistant ChatGPT throwing us this 10, we learned that our assistant forgot to give us that all of them are a lot of parts of many tables. So Priscilla, I think we're going to have a restaurant by then. So all of these tables are basically topics that cannot move forward without collaboration. It's impossible. You cannot move equality and inclusive just by having a group of HR committed DIY people. It's not going to happen. That's it. So all of these things are, once again, a call of collaboration and inspiration for us to explore how we bring to the table exactly what you, Sarah, are doing with the conference. You're bringing a lot of different perspectives. You set the table for all of us, a lot combination of that science background and expertise. And ours is just a casual conversation on a specific topic. But basically it is a big conclusion for us when we started. Priscilla, remember we were looking very serious about donuts economics. That was back 2022. We're like, this is it. And after when we peel the onion, we learned, no, this is not only this is more behind this. So it is what we envision, that the more we learn, the more we find that the industry needs to talk among themselves, and beyond talking, landing on practical solutions, I think.
Right. And I made a last slide that Monica hasn't seen yet, because the discussion, to me, the discussion, it has to be collaborative inside of mining companies themselves.
Exactly.
And that's one of the major problems. We need them to understand themselves as an integrated entity. So we're dealing with cross-disciplinary, cross-functional competency and capacity building inside of the mining companies. And this includes, I just brainstormed 10 because 10 was the number, the geometallurgy and the integrated mine planning, the material flow through the mine has to be understood by everyone involved. We really have to think about, many cases, people think that new technology is going to be disruptive. Well, if we really understand the entire flow, we can make the positive disruptions. And that needs collaboration all along the pathway. We need closure strategies that are integrated across the entire process and across time. And that brings up the big sick idea of time. Monica and I early identified the differences in time perspective between the mining companies and all the other stakeholders as being one of the major issues in actual having communication. But in fact, inside of the mining company, trying to get closure strategies considered rationally when the mining processing people are trying to think about tomorrow. The closure strategy is thinking about 50 years. There's a disjunct there, and we have to figure out how to have that collaborative discussion And then it extends to industrial ecology. We have mining companies that are secretive. They don't want to share information. If we're ever going to think about mine waste as not waste, and I don't use that word anymore, but as unused resource, then we have to understand what that unused resource is and share knowledge about it so that we can find ways to use this unused resource. And you can come back to water and energy stewardship. A lot of that is done by outsourced subs for a mining company because the mining company doesn't want to deal with it. Well, they have to reintegrate responsibility the entire way in a way that they haven't done. But the next 5 years, even as Helen mentioned, 5 years, the next 5 years can be a period of tremendous integration inside of mining. And if that could happen, that's going to make them better collaborators with the stakeholders and the regulators and the population at large outside. And all of this thinking about ESG has become a bee in the bonnet of mining. They're just reporting out the craziness of what they're doing. And we've lost the linkage between ESG and the SDGs. And that has to be reestablished and a real collaborative internally in the mining company before we can actually engage with it externally. So that's a brain dump just saying that we need different scales of collaboration before we're prepared to have a global collaboration relating to natural resource use.
And one thing, Priscilla, just to add, because that inside mining companies, I think that one of the challenges that we don't take into consideration is that mining is a universal industry. Mining is not a bank that is sitting in financial district in New York City or London, or you can locate it in certain areas, or it's not a maquila that you can have Bangladesh and you choose the locations, or ports that you choose locations. We are worldwide operations. So when you will have worldwide operation, having cross-disciplinary and internal collaboration is very challenging. It's very, very difficult because you put into that cake layers of not only the time difference, which is already some people are very tired when they join meetings and the other ones are super fresh when they start, is the culture. And well, we adopt English as a common language, which is already a big progress. But at the same time, is the perception of responsibility is very different. Some countries still, the country wants to have a very important role in the permitting or regulation process. Let's say Canada is very active on observing the processes. Other countries, their countries and legislation is not even existent. So building that inside cross-functional competency, as you say here, is acknowledging that we want to integrate the machine, not because we want it, it's because it's needed. And that's exactly what you're just saying. And all of these elements is very much needed that we see this as a risk, not having done it, and we act as an organized action plan for collaboration. Otherwise, it's not gonna. We're gonna go backwards because we are too big. We cover too many territories, and that is another issue for collaboration. Right. It's possible though.
And I think, but risk is the language that's being adopted internally in mining, in understanding the framework, and bringing that risk framework out to the global risk of not doing collaboration is extremely exciting. And I think it's a framework that may allow the stakeholders and the perceptors to say, yeah, I'm going to invest in this conversation. So there you go.
Brilliant. That was absolutely fantastic, Priscilla and Monica. Big round of applause to both of you. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you for finishing on the wonderful world of risk, because we get to speak about that quite a lot. Just two very quick questions for you before I then bring in the rest of the panel, and then we can round off not only today, but the entirety of the conference. The first question has come in through the Q&A from Janet. And Janet's asking, and I guess, Monica, this is really leaning into what you were saying just then about that post-mining landscape. So how do we hold mining companies accountable in view of the research into the impacts of that kind of post-mining on the socioeconomic lives of people. And I know, Monica, that you didn't hear what Helen was saying about the agriculture world, but it's almost a case here of that land itself, of course, continues through time. So do you have anything there about, well, I mean, I guess in direct response to Janet's question, but then also thinking about that collaboration with different people, different land users, different opportunities with regards to that land as well?
Well, I thank you, Janice, for your question. And sorry, Helen, I miss agriculture. Agriculture is a key partner if we want to see it on a positive way. It's a partner in this puzzle. Number one, land, everything around the conflict of mining goes around land access. And that conflict between the rights on the surface and the rights on underground. And that is a conflict between countries and land occupants. Forget about if they hold rights or not. So it is approaches. Yes, it is a lot of approaches just by simply acknowledging that we are going to use the surface of the land for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, depends on the land, the life of the mine. But at the same time, acknowledging that the land is not going to disappear. Yeah, it might be a hole on the ground, obviously, if we're going to make a hole on the ground, but the environment where the land is not going to disappear. It's going to be reshaped. And one thing that I find important in the engagement process that we don't do is to make communities aware of the changes. And sometimes agreements go that, no, relinquishment is everything going to be fine. Well, no, you have a hole on the ground, or you have a tunnel on the ground, or you will have a shape environment that how you can bring your traditional practices to here. Can agriculture be a partner? I think agriculture, sadly, we put it out of the discussion and should be part of the discussion because it's part of the livelihoods of communities in those areas. So closure starts from the mines opens, and that's one of the challenges in mining. We think that closure starts 5 years before. No, it starts from the first time you just really decided that you're going to build a mine. And that is when agriculture should come in place. I have the opportunity of working with projects that we start working on precisely agriculture as a second income for their families, because agriculture, contrary to mining takes time to find the mineral resource. Agriculture takes time to develop a crop. So the concept of timing is also quite critical for both industries, but you need the time that the mine will give to small farmers, or I have many cases that employees were small farmers and their family taking care, and we just give incentives for them to invest the money in their own farm, and probably the company matching a little bit. So the incentive is there because it will take the time for being a good source of income. When the mine closes, is going to be ready. So it is critical. And the other piece on companies rarely think about is investing on the land rights. In many parts of the world, indigenous peoples, they don't hold the legal rights. They hold the rights given by Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And some regions and some companies are very conscious and respect the fact of being occupants. Some others not. So that is part of the social investing. What is legalize that? Because you want a fair deal, no? You want a clear agreement that, yes, I'm dealing with the owner of the land and we can sign agreements together. So it is avenues, Janice. Thank you very much for your question.
Yeah.
And
well,
Helen,
I think that
Priscilla.
The basic sense of the closure strategies evolve. It's a framework that can work, but it needs to go from exploration through the juniors, through the majors, with continuity of stakeholder engagement. And you hear more talk about co-design with the mining companies. That there's resistance to that concept, but I think as we have so many mines that are looking towards closing facilities in the next 5 to 10 years, where we have not closed very many, I think the framework of closure is extremely important right now, because that's going to, if we can have effective co-design and satisfaction, we're going to reestablish trust in the long term, which is what mining companies don't do so well.
Yeah. And Priscilla, let's think and let's add on something. Closure not only happens with the mineral resources over. Closure in a mini form happens when the price drops, and it's a slow and down operation. So it's a mini crisis. So it's so cute. So when we see those prices drop, we see a slowdown in the production, or sometimes even a stop fully. And that is a closure moment because communities feel their livelihoods fully impacted, no, when they are fully dependent on that. I think closure should work at the same time that exploration works. But you tell that to a junior, it will just be very upset because do I drill or do I invest on this? And investors will looking more for drill hold results than community acceptance. So it is very, very challenges because the core of our industry is undersourced. And Sarah, I'm sure you have heard this a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much to both of you. I've absolutely loved listening to the podcast. I know that, to be honest, if Glenn and Luke had their own way, they would still be speaking now. And so I think actually the true magic is Priscilla, like congratulations and getting them to stop talking for a while.
Not very happy. None of us, I include myself, we were not very happy with
But I think as well with regards to this, really, really looking forward to the next set of series, plural, with regards to the dinner party that you are facilitating. And Rose and I have been quietly speaking behind the scenes. And despite the fact that Rose currently has Stevie on her lap, who I guess technically speaking probably wouldn't be allowed into our pub, but we've decided that Responsible Raw Materials is probably more of a pub than a dinner party. I don't know.
well,
I
I mean, to be honest, Sarah, and at the same time, look at the quality of your pub. Your pub has beers and good friends together, and at the back you have open dialogue sitting in a dining table because we were very lucky and very fortunate that you support our idea. So thank you for that, seriously. So your pub has a dining, so it's fantastic.
There we go. So if you want to come along to, just even if it's just a quick drink, or if you want to come and sit and have some high quality dining experience, you know where to come. So just to say thank you very, very much to Monica and Priscilla. Please, everyone, give them a round of applause. Absolutely fantastic.